Ruben Schwartz, your host and chief nerd. Welcome to Sales for Nerds, the podcast for people who love using their expertise to serve clients but maybe aren't quite so enthusiastic about the sales and marketing aspects of the business. I struggled with this for years, ironically, as a sales and marketing consultant to the Fortune 500. Over time, I realized that there was a more effective, more authentic way to get clients by helping instead of selling, teaching instead of marketing, and connecting instead of networking. My mission is to help you learn the easy way instead of the way I learned it, by sharing my stories, by bringing on awesome guests to share their stories. And of course, as a software guy, I had to go and create the CRM I wished I'd had when I was struggling with more traditional systems. It does more of what us solo consultants need, help us nail our positioning, help us get more leads and conversations off our website, get more referrals, have more conversations, automates proposals all the way through to e-signature and more, and less of the bloat that comes with traditional CRMs. If you want to check it out, you can start a free trial at mimiran.com. That's MIMIRAN.com. And you can even just sign up for the free version, which helps you nail your positioning. And you can also find proposal templates, lead magnet ideas, and more. Once again, that's MIMIRAN.com. Now let's get to it. Today, I'm super excited to have with me Alan Weiss, who wrote one of the most influential books I've ever read, Million Dollar Consulting. If you're watching this on video, I'm holding it up right here. And it's got dog ears. It's got an old American Airlines napkin in it from certain places I wanted to highlight. Really, one of the people that I've wanted to have on this podcast since I started it. And I finally said, well, I don't know when the right time is going to be. Let me just ask him to come join me. And Alan was gracious enough to set aside some time and do that. So Alan, welcome to Sales for Nerds. What do you have in your glass?
Thank you very much. This is from Marietta Vineyards. It's a Cabernet. It's called Armay, which is named after her husband who used to work the valleys and the woods there. It's mainly from the Alexander Valley area. And it's a cab with some Merlot and Malbec and Petit Verdot in it. And it's a moderate wine, moderately priced, but it's good enough to have with any steak.
Excellent. Cheers. And I'm drinking some Cab myself, some Franciscan California Cabernet Sauvignon. And I could go on, and I could take up the whole time of this interview listing Alan's accomplishments and his resume. He's worked with some of the biggest companies on the planet. He's helped lots of smaller consulting firms. He's written a bunch of books, not just Million Dollar Consulting, Million Dollar Proposals, great book. Fearless Leadership is the latest one, and you've got a new one coming out next year. Is that right?
Yes, Legacy comes out in March.
Excellent. If you haven't read that, if you are a consultant and you have not read Million Dollar Consulting, you should probably just turn this interview off and go buy it right now. But just in case, let's dive in. How did you get started consulting, and give us a clue about how long ago that might have been?
Well, first I'll mention that Million Dollar Consulting has been on the shelves for 30 years through 6 editions, which is unprecedented. And I just finished the 6th edition this morning. And so it's going to the publisher. It'll probably be out in July of next year. I got into consulting when I left Prudential Insurance, which I went to after Rutgers University, and I was recruited by a firm in Princeton. So that would be 1972. And in 1972, I was 26 years old, and I stayed at that firm for 11 years. And I was a client service guy. And then they sent me out to run the Western operation out of San Francisco, which had lost $400,000, and they were going to close. And so they said, go out and see if you can do anything, because they didn't trust me. I had no sales background. And the next year we made $1 million. And that's because I simply went to every one of our existing clients and said, how can we help? I became the head of North America. I was the head of Far East and Latin America. And so, like I said, 11 years later, I amicably left. I became president of a consulting firm in Rhode Island, which is how I got up here. And 18 months later, the owner fired me, 18 months later. W. Clement Stone, positive mental attitude. He claimed because of a positive mental attitude, he had $450 million. And I told him that he had a positive mental attitude because he had 450. And if he gave 450 million to everybody, everyone have a positive mental attitude. But his positive mental attitude didn't generate 450 million. He was an insurance wizard. So I went out on my own. In 1985, I wrote Million Dollar Consulting in 1992. And in 1985, I made 2 decisions that saved my life. I said, 1, this is a relationship business. And 2, I will never, ever charge again for a time unit or a person in a room or anything like that. I'm charging on value. And here I sit.
Excellent. Now, was there a specific thing that led to that realization, or was it just sort of the accumulation of seeing how people get treated when they charge by the hour and when they don't?
That's a good question. And there were just a couple of things. One was when I was in Princeton, we sold boxes of training material. So the boxes cost $220 off the presses. We had our own presses then. And we sold it for, 400, $200 a box. And to me, we were driven by the machines. We were driven by our capacity. To me, that wasn't training or consulting. It was just selling stuff. But the second thing was I quickly understood that time-based fees were unethical. A client deserved a quick resolution, but the consultant only made money with a slow resolution. So how can you be in conflict like that? It made no sense. And I saw these big consulting firms, McKinsey and ADL and BCG, and they're paying $300 an hour to these people and trying to figure out how to send them out at $500 an hour. And I said, that's not the kind of work I want to be involved with.
And they're trying to figure out, if we're billing them for 1,000 hours, how can we bill them for 1,200 hours?
It's just silly, and it's an ethical conflict.
I had the same dilemma, and I'm sort of approaching it more from the technology side, which is, what I should do for this client is write a tool that will do the next 100 hours in 5 hours and get them better results faster. But they don't want to pay me to do this. That seems weird. We're at odds, right? Why do I want to, same as you, like, why do I want to do this way? It doesn't seem like it's doing right by the client or encouraging me to do the right thing for my business.
Well, technology has been bringing up the rear. Consulting is about being a brain, but too many technology consultants become a pair of hands. They become really the equivalent of subcontractors, and they're afraid to charge by value because they don't know how to articulate value. And so they act like employees and they deal with low-level people. And it's particularly chronic in that field.
So, and you raise a great point. How should people be articulating value so that they can charge appropriately?
Well, it's easy. You start with the end result and you say, why are you talking to me? What do you want to accomplish? Now, here's a different level, but it's the same principle. Somebody says to a consultant, listen, we need a 2-day leadership retreat. Can you do it? The consultant says, oh yeah, $25,000. But instead, if you ask why, you find there's a dysfunctional management culture. You find that there are silos and so forth, and it's really a $150,000 project, legitimate. Mm-hmm. If you ask why, you go up the decision chain. If you ask how, you go down the decision chain. And that's the problem. It's that simple. I use common sense. I'm not that deep. So consequently, people in IT have to deal with legitimate buyers, not with project managers. They have to deal with legitimate executives, and they have to say, what end result are you looking for? Why are you looking for it? And what's that worth? And then you can craft a proposal where a 10-to-1 return still gets you a huge fee and the client is absolutely ecstatic.
Amen. If I could have you on for 6 or 7 hours, I don't think I would exhaust the thing that I would love you to share with the audience. But especially now that sort of the traditional networking circuit is all blown up because of COVID and all that, what do you see people doing, and what should they be doing if you don't have decades of experience and maybe you need a little help? What do you see consultants doing wrong, and what do you wish they would do instead?
Do you mean in terms of marketing?
In general, so especially, let's assume that they can deliver, because if they can't deliver, that's a whole separate problem. But let's assume that once they get the work, they can deliver it. What should they do differently with sales and marketing?
All right. So so here's the point. There are a lot of excellent consultants who can't market and they're starting. There are a lot of mediocre consultants who can market and they're doing well. And then there are some excellent consultants who are excellent marketers and they can do well. This is the marketing business. So logic makes people think and emotion makes them act. And the problem is in attracting and converting prospects to business, too many consultants make it an intellectual game. It's like a chess game, thinking 3 or 4 moves ahead. And so the buyer eventually says, you have a really good point. That makes a lot of sense. Get back to me next year. Or I like what you're talking about. I think we could do it ourselves. What you have to create is an emotional connection, which creates urgency to act now. And consultants are too timid. They try not to lose business instead of aggressively trying to get business. When you get up in the morning, you either believe that, well, I'm here to make a sale. I got to pay the rent. It's another long, slow crawl through enemy territory. Or what a beautiful, great day, another opportunity. I wonder who I can help. And that difference in mindset makes the difference In this, either you think you're intruding on someone or you're remiss not to contact them because you have so much value. So ironically, we're talking about self-esteem and self-worth here. That's the difference.
Well, and something that I see, and tell me if you've seen this as well, is that people don't focus on their niche. So they are intruding because they're trying to force a square peg into a round hole instead of only talking to the people that they can help who value what they do.
Well, I believe in a variant of that. That is, I'm a generalist. I worked with airlines and drug companies and newspapers and insurance companies, doesn't matter, because I'm a process consultant. Processes are Catholic in the sense of universal. You can apply them anywhere. However, every consultant has to have a value proposition. What is the value I bring to the market in general, and therefore an ideal buyer? And you have to focus your marketing laser-like against your ideal buyer. If somebody comes in the side door, and if nonprofits have come to me, say, could you help us set strategy? We can pay your fee. I said, okay, sit right down. But I don't kid myself and change the trajectory and say, I'm now in the nonprofit business.
Right.
That was a one-off event. It was Fortune 500 companies. Today, it's entrepreneurs globally. So you have to know who your ideal buyer is so you know what form your marketing should take.
That's a great point. And you can always accept people who don't fit your ideal profile when they come to you, but they're going to come to you if you stand for something, not if you stand for nothing.
That's most relevant to them. And anybody who says to me, the whole world's my prospect, I know as an amateur.
So we want to be a little bit more aggressive about going out and helping people. We owe it to people to help them. What should that mean in terms of our marketing or sales efforts or our networking or whatever you want to call it?
Well, it means that you call everybody you know, whether a past client, a current client, a prospect, a family member, a colleague, a professional associate, it doesn't matter. You call everyone you know and you ask them for referrals. And you say something like this: this is the value I'm bringing to the market. Referrals are the lifeblood of my business. I would like to talk to, and you either give a name or a title. You never say, can I have names? You give a name or a title and say, would you introduce me? And people are afraid to do that because they're afraid of being rejected. That's the ego thing again. It's the self-worth thing. So the first thing you do is you make this list of everyone you know and you call them. You don't write them, you call them. People
Yes,
are calling.
amen.
People are afraid of calling. They want to hide behind email. You pick up the damn phone and you call. You get voicemail, you leave a message,
Yep.
Conceptual breakthrough. Okay, second thing you do is when you network, you have to realize that networking is a process. And so you don't network with somebody to try to make a sale. You network with someone to make a relationship and create a subsequent meeting. That's the point of networking. But if you network with someone who's not a buyer, your purpose should be to get introduced to a buyer. Never establish a relationship at a low level. It's pointless. Stay out of the human resources department. HR stands for hardly relevant. Never go there, okay? The third thing is you should host events. You should host something like this on Zoom for 15 people or 30 people, whatever, 30 minutes with some questions and answers about some value that these people will find whets their appetite. And then you offer more material and more insights if they'd like to get in touch with you. So that's just an example of 3 marketing techniques you can use immediately. I'm doing a live stream January 15th about the coming business boom. And I'm convinced that March, April, May, around there's going to be an explosion of business, a tsunami of business. And you have to be prepared for it because like any great wave, you can either surf it or it'll throw you right underneath into the gravel, into the sand. Because I see this boom coming, but a lot of people aren't prepared to take advantage of it.
Okay, so we've got our let's say we've got the willingness to pick up the phone and call people, which I beat on that drum constantly. And as an introvert, it took me a really long time to get there mentally myself. And it's been one of the best things I ever did, not just for business, but for life. Because it's actually nice to talk to people. You're going to offer value added events. You're going to teach people. I call it like, don't market, teach. And then when I have those conversations, when somebody actually makes that introduction, or I get someone on my event who wants to talk more, what should I be doing? I'm guessing you see some people making mistakes there all the time as well.
If you're at an event networking and somebody is interested, you say, listen, this isn't the time or the place. We both have other people to talk to, or we have the next session is starting. But if I could have your private email and your cell phone number, let me give you a call when we're done with this, and we'll set up a meeting where we can focus on this subject. That's what you do. For the referrals, you follow up on the referrals, and you say, Ruben suggested I talk to you. He doesn't do this often, but when he does, it's always a good deal. And I'd like to apprise you of what I've been doing. When you host an event, you say, if you'd like more information, just write to me. I know some things you'd like to ask you don't want to do publicly. I'm happy to talk to you privately. So you always have a next step ready.
Okay, great. And so then you get that meeting where you're actually having a real conversation.
Right.
How do you run that meeting?
Well, there are 4 parts to a meeting like that. Part 1, you establish a trusting relationship. And the trusting relationship means that you offer some free value. You comment on what's going on these days. You see what the other person thinks. You talk about some experiences. You say, well, I see a picture on the wall. It looks like you were in Hawaii. I was in Hawaii. You establish a trusting relationship. The second thing you do is you look at issues which might come out in the first conversation that the client is particularly interested in. And don't kid yourself that there's a problem that needs to be solved. This thing about looking for pain is out of the 1950s. The important thing today is innovation. It's raising the bar. And so you look at issues that are important to the client. The third thing you do then, I have an issue. I want conceptual agreement, which means objectives, measures, and value. And so what would you like to accomplish as a result of resolving this issue? How will we measure progress? And then what's it worth to you? Which goes back to our earlier discussion about fees and worth. Then the fourth thing is you pour cement and you say, I'm going to have a proposal on your desk tomorrow. My proposal is in 2.5 pages. But before I do that, while I'm talking to you now, other than fee, is there anything that we haven't discussed that might cause you not to accept one of my options? Because I want that out now. I want to deal with it. And I make my appointment to talk. So if I get it to you tomorrow, I'll have an appointment to talk to you the day after. And when I talk to you the day after, my opening line is, I know you've had a chance to review the proposal. Which option would you like to go forward with? You make an assumptive close. And that's how you do that. That original meeting we talked about with those 4 points is 1 hour.
Everything makes perfect sense. I think the thing that people are going to say, well, that sounds easy, but how do I actually do it in practice is, how do I get them to talk about value? Because they know that that's going to lead to a higher price, or they're just going to feel uncomfortable, or they don't even know how to quantify it if they wanted to.
See, that's a sign of low esteem right there. The notion that you're afraid that they'll think it leads to a higher price. People assume that the buyer is, looking to avoid fees. They assume that the buyer thinks, oh my God, a salesperson. People don't like to pay a lot of money, but what they hate more is to lose value. What you have to ask is this: what is the value of increasing your market share by 2%? What is the value of producing projects in 10% less time? What is the value of commercializing your products more readily in the marketplace? What's the value of cutting your attrition? And you ask about the money being wasted, the money being spent, the money that is invested, and they like a better return on, and so forth. And if you ask those questions, and most of my books actually have a set of questions, you'll get the value out. And behind every corporate value, behind every corporate objective is a personal objective. So if a buyer says, "Listen, I want my teams to work together better," they're always arguing. What the buyer's really saying is, "I'm tired of playing referee." And if you want to create urgency, that emotional connection I talked about, my ability to get my time freed up and not play referee of these warring teams is worth more than the teams, getting along with each other.
Right.
So there's always a personal objective you have to tap into as well.
I think that's a great point. It kind of ties back into the emotional aspect of how we actually make decisions. I know when I started out, I could put together these nice ROI calculators. Oh, look, if you do this, it saves millions of dollars. Wait, why aren't they doing something? Because I didn't go to the next level into what's really motivating them to take action. Well, maybe I don't want to risk rocking the boat right now because I'm on track for my promotion, right? Or maybe I'm not. And there's a whole other level that I was missing.
Don't forget, though, when people say, yeah, okay, I think we can do it internally, I don't have to spend money, that's more expensive, because if you do something internally, you have to take people who are now doing something and put them over here, which means they're not doing that anymore.
Right.
Also, you have turf battles and culture battles and all this kind of stuff. So I make a point all the time that trying to do something internally never works.
Well, something's working, right? That's why they have employees. But if it was working all the time, they wouldn't be calling you.
Well, we're talking about trying to implement new things, innovation.
Sure.
We're not talking about running the machines or selling insurance. Yeah, they're doing that every day. But the fact is, look, in any business, your business, my business, anyone who's listening to this, if you are not climbing, you're not succeeding. Because if you're on a plateau, plateaus eventually erode out of entropy. And the only coasting I've ever seen is downhill. Nobody coasts up. And so every organization, every client, every prospect you see has to be helped to climb.
That's a great point. And I think there's something else which I think you're alluding to, but I want to have an explicit conversation about it. Is if you're going in there like you're an employee of the buyer, you have a very different conversation than if you're a peer of the buyer, right? They should be talking to you as a peer that they need help solving a business problem with. And if they could have solved it internally, it would have been done by now.
Well, that's right. And to be a peer, you have to be willing to push back.
Right.
And what I said earlier is they try too hard not to lose business, which makes you a subordinate, makes you agree to everything. I mean, I've told any number of buyers, that, well, your problem is your business model's wrong. It's a business model for 20 years. Yeah, that's exactly my point.
It's coasting.
Sometimes I don't get the sale, but when the other person says to me, no one's ever told me that. Tell me more. I know I have them.
Right. That's one of those signs, right? When they say, oh, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, I mean, signs of trust are you're asked for advice on things, you're told things that are confidential. There's a laughter, there's humor that's shared, and people are willing to debate positions which they already hold. Well, our sales force has always been great. Yes, but in this day and age, you don't need feet on the street. But they have this great reputation. They have reputation with people who are dying off. And you have that kind of back and forth.
So basically you treat them like you're sitting down with a friend and they're coming to you with a problem.
You're talking over a drink to somebody and you're discussing things and, and nobody at a bar gets up and stomps and walks away.
Right. It's kind of like Sales for Nerds. If there's one thing that you think people should focus on for 2021, and I know that's a big ask, it's a simple question with probably a complicated answer, but what should people do?
Well, I'll give you a simple answer. The thing to focus on is optimism, because things are going to bounce back, not to normal, not to a new normal. The world is changing, but the world will continue to change. You see, we look at volatility and disruption, which if you think about it, ought to be a law firm, right? Volatility and disruption. We look at it as though we have to be defensive and hunker down, but volatility and disruption should be used as offensive weapons. In the 90s, I introduced value-based fees for consultants, and today I have the strongest independent consulting brand in the world. That's what results from that. And so you have to disrupt your marketplace. You have to create volatility. And I would look to do that this coming year, because a lot of people see ambiguity. A lot of people have become cautious. And, we've gotten very uncertain kind of guidance, not malicious, but, from scientists, from government, from academic leaders, from politicians. We've been told things that just turned out not to be true. And I'm not even talking about deliberate lying. I'm just saying people with their best efforts were wrong because they didn't understand the situation. The critical thinking skills were awful. And so people need guidance, and that's what we need to give them.
Well, and when there's volatility and disruption and you're sort of making a new world, that's when presumably people need consultants the most.
They need trusted advisors. That's right.
Well, Alan, I know you're on a tight time schedule. I really appreciate your time with me today. And thank you so much for $1 Million Consulting. I don't know what I would have done without it. I struggle enough with it. Lord knows what would have happened if I hadn't had that. And like I said, if you haven't read it, by all means, go read it. And thank you very much. Cheers.
It's my pleasure. Tell everybody, go to alanweiss.com. Free text, free audio, free video, alanweiss.com. Cheers.
Thanks for listening. Did something in this episode or a past episode help you out? I'd love to hear about it. Send comments, questions, or ideas for future episodes to hello@salesfornerds.io. And of course, iTunes reviews are super helpful for getting the word out. So if you've got a few moments to put one of those up, I'd really appreciate it. If you've got a friend who'd benefit from one of these episodes, send a link. If you've got a friend who wouldn't benefit from one of the episodes, but you just haven't talked to in a while, this is a great excuse to pick up the phone and give them a call. Of course, if you're looking for a whole new take on CRM for solo consultants, along with proposal templates, lead magnet ideas, free positioning tools, and more, check it out at mimiran.com. That's MIMIRAN.com. Again, thanks for listening, and until next time, cheers.